let me tell you a story that will break your heart before it heals it. A story about a woman named Adunni Okafor, whose world shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of a single day in Lagos, Nigeria. It was a cold February morning in 2018, and the harmattan winds were still whispering through the crowded streets of Alamosho. Adunni had been married to Chidi for 6 years, and today, her body was telling her that their first child was ready to meet the world. At 39 weeks pregnant, the contractions were coming fast and strong. Picture this scene with me. A young woman, her belly round with life, holding onto the dashboard of an old Honda as her husband navigated the chaotic Lagos traffic toward Alamosho General Hospital. The usual symphony of car horns, Okada engines, and street vendors filled the air, but inside that car, there was an eerie silence. Chidi's eyes weren't on the road ahead, or on his laboring wife beside him. No, his eyes were glued to his phone, message after message lighting up his screen. Adunni noticed, but she was too focused on her breathing, too focused on the waves of pain washing over her body, to question it. She trusted him. She trusted that he was as excited as she was to meet their son. Oh, how wrong she was. They arrived at the hospital, and if you've ever been to a government hospital in Lagos, you know the scene. The corridors buzzing with nurses in starched white uniforms, families camping out on benches, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the heat of too many bodies in too small a space. Adunni was quickly wheeled into the maternity ward, and the nurses, bless their hearts, got her settled into bed. Between her deep breaths and the mounting pressure in her body, Adunni watched Chidi pace back and forth. But then, something strange happened. He walked over to her bedside, and in his hand was a brown envelope. A manila envelope that looked too formal, too serious for a moment that should have been filled with joy. "What's this?" Adunni asked weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Chidi couldn't look her in the eyes. Not once. He stared at the floor, at the walls, at anything but the woman who was about to give birth to his child. "Papers," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "What kind of papers?" she pressed, though something deep in her heart already knew. "Divorce papers. Can you imagine? Can you imagine hearing those words while you're in active labor?" At first, Adunni thought the pain was making her hallucinate. Surely, she had misheard. Surely, the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, the man whose baby was fighting to enter this world, wasn't standing there with divorce papers. "What?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore, Adunni. I've met someone else. You'll be better off without me." And then, just like that, he walked out. He walked out of that hospital room, out of her life, and out of his son's life before the child had even taken his first breath. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like thunder in Adunni's ears. She lay there frozen, heartbroken, humiliated, and still in labor. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand something. This woman was experiencing the ultimate betrayal at the most vulnerable moment of her life. But what happened next? That's where the real story begins. The nurses rushed back in, unaware of the devastation that had just occurred. They saw a woman in labor, not a woman whose world had just collapsed. Adunni clenched her fists and screamed, not just from the physical pain coursing through her body, but from the emotional agony tearing her soul apart. Hours passed. Hours of labor, hours of heartbreak, hours of coming to terms with a new reality. And then, finally, a cry pierced the air. Not Adunni's cry this time, but the cry of new life. Her son, Emeka, had arrived. When the nurse placed that tiny, wrinkled baby in her arms, Adunni broke down completely. Here was this perfect little human being, innocent and beautiful, and he would never know his father's embrace on his first day of life. No celebratory photos, no proud daddy cutting the umbilical cord, no family gathering to welcome the newest member. Just Adunni, with her bloodshot eyes and tear-stained cheeks, holding her son. "It's just us now, Emeka," she whispered into his tiny ear as he settled against her chest. "But I promise you this, you will never, ever feel alone." And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Something that would change both their lives forever. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of recovery and paperwork. Chidi never came back. He never signed the birth certificate. When it came time to fill out those forms, Adunni wrote "Father," unknown, with a steady hand, though her heart was breaking with each stroke of the pen. When she finally left the hospital and returned to their small flat in Alamosho, everything looked the same, but everything had changed. The baby clothes they had bought together, the crib Chidi had assembled just weeks before, the dreams they had shared for their future family. It was all still there, but it felt hollow now, like echoes in an empty room. Life after the hospital wasn't just difficult, it was brutal. The bills started piling up immediately. Adunni had been working as a part-time substitute teacher, which barely covered their expenses when there were two incomes. Now, with a newborn and no partner, she had to rely on government assistance just to keep food on the table. The nights were the worst. Little Emeka had colic, and he would cry for hours on end. Adunni would walk the floors of their small apartment, bouncing him, singing to him, praying for just a moment of peace. Some nights, she felt like she was drowning. Some nights, she wondered if Chidi was right. Maybe Emeka would be better off without her too. But then she would look down at those brown eyes, so much like her own, and see nothing but trust. Pure, innocent trust. This little boy was depending on her for everything: food, shelter, love, protection. And something fierce awakened in her heart. This is where Adunni's transformation begins, my friends. She started taking remote tutoring jobs at night when Emeka finally fell asleep. She would sit at her small dining table, laptop open, teaching mathematics and English to students across Lagos via video call. During the day, when Emeka napped, she read every book on child development she could get her hands on. She sang lullabies until her voice was hoarse, and she poured love into every moment, even when she felt like she had nothing left to give. When Emeka turned 3, something beautiful happened. This little boy, who had never known his father's voice, who had only ever known his mother's love, started showing signs of brilliance. He was asking questions that amazed the adults around him. He was curious about everything: how things worked, why the sky was blue, what made people happy or sad. And Adunni looked at her son and made a decision that would change everything. But that, my friends, is where our next chapter begins. When we left Adunni's story, she was staring at her 3-year-old son Emeka, seeing brilliance in his eyes and making a decision that would change everything. What happened next will restore your faith in the power of a mother's love and determination. Picture Lagos State University on a warm evening in 2021. Students are rushing to night classes, carrying hopes and dreams in their worn backpacks. Among them walks a young woman with determination written across her face. Adunni Okafor, 28 years old, single mother, and now, nursing student. You see, when Emeka turned 3, Adunni realized something profound. She had always loved science, had always been drawn to helping people heal. And watching her son's curious mind blossom, she knew she needed to become the woman he could be proud of. Not just survive, but thrive. The evening nursing program at Lagos State University was perfect for her situation. While her mother, Mama Okafor, watched little Emeka in their Alamosho flat, Adunni would take 2 buses to Ojo campus, attend lectures until 10 p.m., then take those same buses home to study while her son slept. Let me tell you what determination looks like. Adunni aced every exam, every single one. When other students complained about the workload, she stayed quiet and kept studying. When Emeka caught malaria and she missed a crucial midterm, she didn't make excuses. She studied harder and begged for a makeup exam. Her professors began to notice this quiet woman who never missed an assignment, who asked thoughtful questions, who seemed to absorb knowledge like a sponge. "You don't give up, do you?" Professor Adebayo asked her one evening after she'd presented a flawless case study. "Not an option, sir," Adunni replied simply. "My son is watching." And indeed he was. Little Emeka was watching everything. During the day, while Mama Okafor sold vegetables at Alamosho Market, Adunni would homeschool her son. This boy was extraordinary. By age 5, he was reading chapter books. By 6, he was solving math problems that amazed adults. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" he asked one afternoon while they studied together at their small dining table. Adunni paused, her pen hovering over her anatomy notes. This question had been coming, and she had prepared for it. "Your daddy made a choice to leave, Emeka. But I made a choice too. I chose to love you with everything I have." Emeka nodded thoughtfully, then wrapped his small arms around her neck. "Then you're enough, Mama." In that moment, Adunni knew her son would grow up stronger than his father ever was. By the time Emeka turned 6, Adunni had graduated nursing school with honors and secured a position at Lagos University Teaching Hospital in Idi Araba. She worked night shifts in the emergency ward, and during the day, she continued homeschooling Emeka. This routine was exhausting, but something beautiful was happening. Emeka wasn't just smart, he was brilliant. He devoured books about science, about medicine, about how the human body worked. And then one day, he said something that stopped Adunni in her tracks. "Mama, I want to become a doctor so that mothers don't have to cry alone in hospitals." Do you understand what this child had done? Without knowing his own story, without knowing about that terrible February day when he was born, this 6-year-old had somehow understood his purpose. Adunni printed those words and taped them inside her hospital locker. Every day, when she put on her nursing uniform, she would read them and remember why she was fighting so hard. The years that followed were a blur of achievement. Emeka started participating in science competitions across Lagos State. By age 10, he was winning national science fairs. Adunni never missed a single event. She would work extra shifts to get time off, and she cheered louder than any parent in those auditoriums. "She's more than a mom," Emeka once told his science fair mentor. "She's my reason for everything." When his teacher later told Adunni what her son had said, she sat in her car outside the school and cried. Quiet tears of joy, of validation, of knowing that every sleepless night had been worth it. But then, life threw them a curveball. When Emeka was 12, Adunni ran into Chidi at a total petrol station in Ikeja. He looked older, tired, and completely shocked to see her. She looked radiant, confident, successful. "Adunni, you look good," he stammered. She simply nodded. Professional, polite, nothing more. "Is that your car?" he asked, eyeing her neat Honda Civic. "Yes, paid off," she replied matter-of-factly. "You're doing okay then?" "More than okay," she answered with quiet confidence. That's when Emeka came out of the convenience store, tall for his age, carrying himself with confidence. He looked at the man talking to his mother with curious but uninterested eyes. "Who's that, Mama?" Adunni glanced at Chidi, then back at her son. "Just someone from the past, my dear." Chidi stood there speechless, watching the son he had abandoned walk away. Tall, brilliant, confident, and completely unfamiliar to him. The boy didn't even know who he was. The irony was perfect. Chidi had walked away from a diamond, thinking it was just a rock. High school came quickly, and Emeka's achievements multiplied. He was accepted into advanced programs at the University of Lagos while still in secondary school. Science fairs, debate competitions, academic scholarships. Emeka collected achievements like other teenagers collected video games. Adunni was there for everything. Every award ceremony, every speech, every moment of triumph. She had become a senior nurse at LUTH by then, respected by her colleagues, financially stable, and incredibly proud. Then came Emeka's final year project in secondary school. A video about being raised by a single mother. In it, he shared their story without revealing all the painful details. He talked about strength, about resilience, about what happens when one parent chooses to be enough for two. The video ended with Emeka looking directly into the camera and saying, "Success isn't about who's in your corner at the start. It's about who never leaves." That video changed everything. Within 48 hours, it had over 1 million views across social media platforms. People from across Nigeria, across Africa, across the world were sharing Emeka and Adunni's story. News outlets reached out. International media wanted interviews. One morning, Adunni woke up to an email from CNN International asking if she and Emeka would appear on their African Voices program. She sat in her kitchen, coffee mug trembling in her hands, barely able to believe it. Their segment aired 3 weeks later. Sitting in the CNN studios in Lagos, dressed in a beautiful blue dress, Adunni found herself in front of cameras being broadcast around the world. "Adunni," the host asked, "your son credits you for everything he's become. What kept you going during the hardest times?" Adunni looked into the camera and said, "Knowing that I was his first and only line of defense. I couldn't afford to quit." The studio audience applauded, but what happened next brought tears to viewers worldwide. Emeka reached for his mother's hand and looked into the camera. "She didn't just raise me," he said with emotion. "She rebuilt herself. She became the woman I needed her to be." That clip exploded across social media. Hashtag Mama Adunni and hashtag Raised by a Queen began trending across Africa. Later that night, Adunni received a WhatsApp message from a number she recognized but hadn't heard from in years. It was simple. "I saw the interview. I'm sorry. I was a complete fool." She stared at Chidi's message for a long time. Not with anger, but with peace. She had nothing left to say to him. He had missed everything: first steps, first words, first achievements, and now global recognition. His regret was his burden to carry, not hers. She deleted the message without responding. The ending of our story is beautiful, my friends. Emeka received full scholarship offers from universities around the world, but he chose to stay in Nigeria, enrolling in the prestigious College of Medicine at the University of Lagos. "I want to be trained by African excellence," he told his mother. "I want to serve our people." Today, Dr. Emeka Okafor is one of Nigeria's most celebrated young physicians, specializing in trauma surgery. He has opened free medical clinics across Lagos State, focusing on underserved communities like Alamosho, where his journey began. And Adunni? She now runs the Adunni's Light Foundation, helping thousands of single mothers across Nigeria pursue education and build better lives for their children. On the 25th anniversary of Emeka's birth, that terrible, beautiful February day that changed everything, they stood in the garden of their beautiful home in Lekki, surrounded by friends, family, and the team from their foundation. Emeka raised his glass and said, "She started with nothing but gave me everything. My name is Dr. Emeka Okafor, but before any of that, I am hers." Adunni smiled, looked up at the Lagos stars, and whispered, "We made it, my son." And for the first time in her life, every wound, every tear, every lonely night felt completely and utterly worth it. That broken woman in that hospital room 25 years ago, she didn't just survive. She didn't just rebuild. She became extraordinary. And she raised a son who is changing the world, one life at a time. Remember this story when life breaks you down. Remember Adunni. Remember that sometimes the most beautiful victories come from the deepest pain.